So this report, Overloaded, investigates how poverty drives school children into paid work. And shortly, Harry Shee, the author of the report, will go through the key findings and recommendations of our research. But I wanted to sort of just take a moment to go through the background of how we came to undertaking the research in the first place in our journey as well. So Child Poverty Action Group has been undertaking research, advocacy and education on child poverty for a long time. In fact, this year will be 30 years of us doing this mahi. So this particular project came about from news reports where schools were talking about the issue of school students working long hours of paid work on top of their schooling to pay for basics, for household expenses, things like food and rent and power for their households. So this phenomena, it also seemed to be exacerbated by COVID and the cost of living crisis that we continue to be in. And we were very, I'll just allow this recording as well. So we got in touch with one of our funding partners, Te Roro, One New Zealand Foundation, which Ezekiel heads. And we were particularly interested in their OHI data, OHI data tool, which we believe would give us some background and add value to our background research that we needed. But actually over the year of doing this research, then Te Roro actually have added value on top of this as they've helped support us find community partners and analysts to do this work. So this really is a bit of a lesson for us, and I hope to other community groups as well, that funders can provide additional support other than just monetary. And so I wanted to just take a quick moment to say thank you to the team at Te Roro for this partnership support. So partway through last year, Indira Stewart, which she said she might be on this, so shout out to her. She's investigative journalist Indira Stewart, did an in-depth media piece sharing stories of young people in this actual situation. So personal stories are really important as they call us to action. And so before Harry speaks on details of the research findings and the recommendations, I would like to share a short clip from Indira's reporting. And I hope that watching this focuses us to the fact that every child in this situation is actually a tragedy. And when there are thousands, as our research has uncovered, then we are looking at a national disaster. So these stories call us to action, and it is the reason we're actually here today, all of us, because we actually care. And it calls us to come together as well to find those answers and the solutions. And so later on, as we take the partai and the comments, I'm looking forward to that discussion as well. So ngā mihi nui, everyone, and I'll share this recording.
This is the juggle that many students here are facing, but they're among the hardest working youth in the country, and they're doing it for family.
The money I earn from working really helps my family, especially paying for our rent and our power and water, because it's really expensive nowadays. My parents are both full-time workers, but whatever they got left is not enough to pay off our rent. So that's when I come in with the money that I've earned to just help them and to make sure that they're not alone on this. So I managed to buy my own uniform, my own stationery, even my brother's uniform, because I have a little brother here. They're just like, oh, you didn't have to do this. This isn't your job to provide for us. It's their job to provide for us and my siblings. But yeah, I just wanted to thank them in a way that I could.
So on that note, I'll transfer it over to Harry, who will speak on the research itself.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm just here to speak on the project we've done over the last few months, looking into students' potential to be driven into overworking in high school. And I'll just get it started. So firstly, allow me to provide an overview of how we started on this journey and the framework we're trying to understand. Generally, in international literature, they have looked at this issue of high school student employment and education through a threshold framework. And this generally understands that 20 hours, this is threshold between the good and the bad. And these studies are based on evidence from United States, United Kingdom, Norway, Belgium, and Australia. And generally, under 20 hours has been viewed as positive or having no impact on students' educational outcome, while over 20 is considered intensive work hours and generally is believed to have a linear negative relationship to educational outcomes. So for the goods, a lot of it has been centered around talks of human capital development. And one of the key things that people valorizes education, adolescent employment is about development of a work attitude and soft skills such as communication, time management, and interpersonal skills. And these opportunities of human capital development are argued to be critical for secondary students' successful transition into subsequent life stages, namely the early adulthood. And these early adulthood generally happens either through people transitioning to higher education or training, or they enter the workforce immediately. So studies in Norway and the United States have found that adolescent employment can act as a safeguard for vulnerable youths, such as early school leavers and young people with disabilities, against falling into the NEET status, not in education, employment, or training. One of the reasons that adolescent employment can act as a safeguard is due to its signaling effect to employers and college enrollment officers. Studies of student employers in Belgium showed that work experience as a teenager demonstrates that a student possesses a good work attitude. And this signaling effect typically boosts young people's employability for some years into the early adulthood, typically around one's mid-20s, where one can gain traction in terms of labor market mobility and build a stable livelihood. It is through student employment's preventative effect on NEET status that scholars and perhaps politicians valorizes student workforce participation at a younger age. Student employment has also been found to correlate with students' increased participation in extracurricular and community activities. These activities have found to be empowering of students' confidence and social connectedness, and therefore their overall sense of well-being. These activities, extracurricular and community, have also been noted for its positive impact on educational outcomes in the United States content. Overall, the bad is generally quite a black and white picture after going over 20 hours. There's a general consensus that working over 20 hours has detrimental effect on students' education outcomes. And this is tested in the United States and United Kingdom through metrics such as high school completion or dropout rates and test grade deterioration over time. Working intensive hours is also understood to be correlated with increased substance and alcohol abuse. As being suggested, this is a combined result of increased income, disengagement from education, and imagined futures associated with educational pathways. That's saying someone not wanting to pursue studies anymore and becoming embedded in a different social network consisting of older peers. But there are some questions still left to be asked and to still be debated within this framework. Particularly, the threshold approach is very contextual, and then it can change. The number of hours can change depending on the education system you're in, typically the curriculum or the age of the school year that one students enter school employment, into student employment. And for other perspectives, study on this project on this topic generally takes on a quantitative approach that measures employment's impact on educational outcomes with a snapshot survey at different ages, and in relation, they are connected, indexed to baseline demographic and socioeconomic variables such as sex, household deprivation, and ethnicity. This makes it very challenging to assess students' employment's effect on their engagement with school, as it cannot capture how students become disinterested in school over time, or whether the decision to seek employment is tied to change in personal aspirations and circumstances. There's also little understanding how labor market changes affect students' interest in school, particularly in post-COVID economic challenges where paid work might be more attractive than school. So with that in mind, one of our first findings is to assess how this topic has been understood in New Zealand. And one of the first things we find is that the first New Zealand studies that fits the kind of framework that's being upheld at the international level was only done in 2010. And this report, everyone can have a look through our summaries, our report, or the Department of Labor. You can access through MB. But this is about 14 years ago, where it had a good understanding about students' motivation to seek employment, and about the motivations are tied and indexed to different ethnicities, geographies, age, and gender. And it did provide an initial assessment that it was less than 10 to 20 hours had positive or no effect on NCEA students' tests. However, that needed to be further tested, and it was not followed up in subsequent reports. So since then, we have the Youth 12 surveys, which only outlined students' participation in employment rate. And we can only gain a grasp understanding of the overall national participation over 20 hours through their sample. And other than those variables, a lot of things are missing, particularly the motivation for employment. We couldn't understand why these students are looking for work, and they were not tied to socioeconomic or demographic variables. And this gradually just began to fall out of focus from there. The Youth 19 survey did not look into any of those important variables like a motivation for employment, the hours of work, which industries they work in, or assessments of the educational outcomes. During COVID times, there are 2 reports that talk about this initially, but did not give us a very, very accurate picture of what it's like in the post-COVID times, especially given there's lockdown restrictions. So the MSD, Ministry of Social Development, What About Me report that was collected data in 2021, and that's when COVID restriction was still in place. It provided a very low rate of students working in full-time jobs, but it is still concerning, as in they collected data of students working close to 40 hours. And that's translated to almost 6,000 students nationally. Another important insight from this report is about how students were feeling about their work and their engagement. And generally, there's a disparity in the confidence of them juggling the work. And we kind of cited initially of missing out report from Educational Review Office, but it was quite difficult to navigate through because it sampled year 4 to 13 students. So we try to gain a clearer picture by looking into the New Zealand stats. And first thing we went to was the household labor force survey. And we can see over time, I'd like to draw your attention to 4 patterns I think that is interesting and relevant. So there's an overall decrease in the number of students that's solely enrolled in education, and is now at 39% in 2023. And secondly, return to a high level of rigor of students in employment education. So at 28%, this is a very, very high amount of students that's juggling both school and work. And 3, there's a dip in the number of youth that's in employment only after COVID. So this kind of suggests that youths are still seeing importance of education, but they're not abandoning. Sorry about that. And then the last pattern I'd like to draw attention to is that the overall pattern and the levels of youth participation in employment and education is returning to the 2007 and 2009 era. And that's the time when the first Department of Labor report was conducted and reporting attention being turned into this. And some of the following graphs is kind of showing a similar trend. And this one is showing number of 15 to 19-year-olds in education and employment by ethnicity. And we can see there's a a huge pickup during the COVID time and slight dips in the last year, but it's still returning again to that 2007 to 2009 level. And this is a similar story in those for employment and not in education. And again, there's that dip in the last year, which suggests that people are start picking up their education again. One of the things which Tiruru have tried to assist us with is trying to get a clear picture and try to scope out whether the juggling of paid work and education is more severe in areas of high deprivation. And we picked South Auckland to do that. But one of the issues was the access to data that was only available at the time was between July 2021 and June 2022. So there's likely an underrepresentation as South Auckland was still affected by 4-month lockdown by the end of 2021. And one of the ways we try to work this is that as there's no exact measurement of students' work hour, we try to take their RD income data, and then we confirm that by Stats New Zealand Household Economic Survey that on average a 17-year-old or 18-year-old was making the minimum wage. And we try to divide that and then categorize that to the average work hours. And we find out overall that South Auckland youth, whether Pacific or other ethnicities, were as likely as on a national level to engage in intensive work hours as the rest of New Zealand. And we suspect that number might be even higher once we considering the underrepresentation due to COVID lockdown. And from this calculation, we get a number around 7,000 students, but again, there's a very, very high underrepresentation in South Auckland, and there's data suppression in the 16-year-old data set that we cannot include to assess accurately. So through this, our recommendations that we first, I think, was very important to understand the issue. This issue has been clearly been neglected since 2010, and we need to understand the problem before we try to solve it and make informed policy decisions. And this should be an understanding in New Zealand for parents and educators that how many hours is too many hours for students overworking. And we should, one of the things we identified that this issue between student employment and education has been decoupled between different ministries, where MB has been primarily focusing on transitioning students into paid employment, while Ministry of Education has been trying encouraging students into higher education. And lastly, we see that this is a base problem of families struggling with household incomes. And we feel like, with the current political climate and things like that, this situation might drive more students into paid employment. And thank you for that.
Ka pai, I think that's my cue to jump in there. Team Tuatahi me mihi atu kia kōrua. Sarita, Harry, for those insights, for sharing your feedback and the context, to the report and the mahi. I'm going to throw it over to Julie and the team, who will take us through the Q&A session before we wrap up a little later on. Throwing it over to the CPAG team.
I can't. Oh, kia ora all. I can't see any questions on the thing. Does maybe if people put their hand up and then we can see if there's any questions. I can't see any in the chat. Are people able to write in the chat any questions? Does anyone? Let's see. Oh, is there a question, a question come through? Oh, it's just a side, not a chat. One of the so I just read it out from Margaret. One of the drawbacks with human capital theory is that much of the research is in USA and outcomes which are deemed to include those who have not been incarcerated. Incarcerated in US differs from other states. The life trajectory, as you say, differs depending on ethnicity and other motivation variables. Much policy reports drawn in methodology from OECD and other supranational organisations which become dominant. Okay. Okay, thank you, Margaret. Is there anyone else that have any questions? Maybe Harry covered it all and you've had a chance to look as well at the chat. Shall I give another minute just in case there's anything or? Oh, but one thing we are going to put out is a toolbox. So whenever we do these webinars, we put together a toolbox of relevant videos and all the things. And as well, we'll be recording. We've recorded this session as well, so that will come up. Yeah, but the main and I think the main thing that we wanted to put out to this presentation today was about the data, the need for that data. Oh wait, there is another question. Interested in finding that some employers are using kids for school hours. How widespread is this? Yeah, that is one of the things that we actually don't know. There's a lot of anecdotal work, you know, like there's anecdotal stories everywhere about this issue, but the data hasn't been collected, and so that's what we want to do, and that's what we're calling on the ministries to do. So we're already in contact with the Stats New Zealand around the fact that the household data includes this this income from children, and so that's something we're working on, and after this we're going to go with letters and the things to the different ministries to call on them to act on this. So yeah, so nice. That's about all, Ezekiel. So I'll just hand it back to you, I think. Oh, wait, I do have some other questions. Could we speak to the mismatch a bit more? Oh, Harry, did you want to say anything about the mismatch between the cross-ministry approach? Or I think actually we're in the
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Harry.
Is that from the last government, there's a youth employment action plan, and they have targeted plan for each ethnic group, priority groups as well. And same with the Ministry of Education plan, and they have a specific education plan from 2020 to 2030. And the Pacific Education Plan, in my view, has really focused on helping Pacifica students transitioning from secondary education to tertiary education. And its policy actions revolves around resourcing and empowering educators to embrace the Pacifica cultural identity, which is a very important aspect. As there's a lot of research about Pacifica students feeling how would you put it? They feel disadvantaged or they feel disempowered because they're not proud of their culture and things like that. On the other hand, the Pacifica and Māori and disabled youth employment action plan is about empowering different ministry agencies and helping these priority groups on how to develop their human capital more and helping them become more employable or helping them transition back into education. So this whole connection or linkage between overworking, most likely driven by poverty, is kind of being missed out and not being monitored. And like it's kind of fall out of both action plans. And that's the mismatch that I've identified in the report.
And I just saw one more question that I thought I'd like to respond to. People are sometimes a child needing to be lifted out of poverty, and other times they are an adult contributing to household income. So how does the state understand what it means to be a child? That's from Amber. Under the Child Poverty Reduction Act, we actually have the definition of a child as a child is under the age of 18. So that is where that a mismatch. Another mismatch is that these children are they're themselves taking themselves out of poverty. Yeah. Ezekiel, I'll hand it back to you now. No.
Ka pai. Oh, I can see you slowly getting messages in, and I think, team, if any partai, any questions arise after the webinar, please reach out to the CPAG whānau. Obviously, they're more than happy to continue having these conversations, more importantly, about where the work goes next and how we can collectively and continuously support each other to ensure that our young people aren't seen as an acceptable substitute in the spaces and places where we know they should be focused in, or given the opportunity to focus in on the education. Hoi anō, ka waihoki ngā kōrero ki reira. We'll leave the conversation there. We'll close with the karakia. And on behalf of CPAG and Te Raurea, just wanted to thank each and every one of you for making time, probably over your lunch, hence all the cameras are off and whatnot, everyone's eating while you're listening into the webinar. We hope it's been insightful, but more importantly, hopefully, it's incited in some way, shape, or form encouragement to continue to act. Ka waiho ki reira, mi reo tātou whakaru ki te atua mino e tātou kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ari ki ai Hukaraiti, me te aroha te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairua tapu ake. Āmine. Have a fantastic afternoon, everyone.